And we've got some pretty breaking news here within the last hour or so regarding Bill Belichick and North Carolina D. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about in regards to the Tar Heels today, but we've got to start with this, as it seems like there's a bit of uncertainty regarding Bill Belichick's future. He has not officially signed his contract with North Carolina, not completely uncommon in the coaching world. We saw Coach Moore at Michigan had something similar this year. So this is something that people talk about, and your background as an attorney can kind of get more into the details of certain things like this. But Bill Belichick, he's been out recruiting, but it looks like he might still have an eye on the NFL here.
Yeah, look, a lot of mixed reports here. So he's out recruiting. So looking at his actions, he's out recruiting. He's hiring staff, which we'll talk about in a second. I know there were reports that his delay in hiring staff might have been because he was still looking at the NFL. He's, of course, hired some staff members that we'll talk about here. But this is not totally uncommon to rely on a term sheet in college football before going with the fully executed, fully signed employment contract. So right now that's where they are. They have a term sheet with the buyout attached. $10 million drops to $1 million after June for the NFL. And then, it's not as formalized into the final employment contract. So we'll see where this goes. Mike Lombardi was on Twitter. That's basically the GM of North Carolina's program. And he was very, very vocal, pushing back on reports from Pro Football Talk and others. Mike Florio saying, look, we are here in college. We're recruiting. We feel good. Pete,
here's the tweet right here. Yeah, Mike Lombardi says, Bill is recruiting in D.C. today and Baltimore tomorrow. His focus is on North Carolina football, hiring staff members, and developing the team. The NFL isn't an option, so please stop making it one. Thank you. So that was one, and that was in response to Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports, kind of talking about the report that we were just referencing here. And then I'll go back even more so. An hour ago, Mike Lombardi tweeted, the reception towards UNC and Coach Belichick has been amazing from every school we visit. We are going to fight to keep North Carolina football players here and bring the best to Chapel Hill. So obviously trying to kind of quell any sort of concern from Carolina fans, and more so, I would say, recruits and guys who are just transferring in, or they're still trying to wrap up this transfer class, from worrying about Belichick's future. But I guess we'll see how it plays out here over the next few weeks.
Yeah, again, just to go over some of the terms I used earlier, if I didn't explain them fully. Term sheet, you're talking, you're coming to an agreement, then you come to the key terms of the agreement with some of the legal details to be sorted out later. That happens a lot. You see it when you're settling cases. Maybe it's a very long mediation. Parties are there till, late into the hours of the night, maybe towards midnight. And you say, we got a deal. Let's get a term sheet. Let's sign it. Let's get out of here. And then we'll fill in the rest later and make it really formal with the long, full-blown contract. That's what you have right now between Belichick and UNC. They don't have the full-blown contract yet. That's not totally unusual. It's not like people break these term sheets regularly. There are very much there's room for interpretation with all this stuff. It's very possible that term sheet is enforceable as to the key terms. The key term really being that the buyout is $10 million until June 1st of this year, 2025. Then after June 1st, it drops to $1 million. So from 10 to 1, allowing him to leave. So that's kind of the date to watch. I don't see, obviously these teams are trying to fill in their head coaching vacancy pretty quick. So it's not like there's going to be a lot of NFL head coaching vacancies come June 1st. So I think you can expect Bill Belichick to stick around unless something happens really, really fast here. But it sounds like he's on the road recruiting and hiring staff, which we're going to talk about here in a second, recruiting quarterbacks, which we'll talk about in a second, all of which suggest that he's trying to stick around with UNC, at least for this year. And, give us at least a glimpse as to what this program looks like under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Look, it wouldn't be the first time that a coach is out recruiting and hiring staff members while at the same time having an eye elsewhere and getting hired or being in the process of getting hired elsewhere. But you referenced that there have been some additions here, and Bill Belichick adds 2 coaches to his staff, keeping with the theme of bringing a lot of experience to the table. One of them being veteran O-line coach Will Friend, the other one being NFL special teams coach Mike Pryfer, who, this is a great fact here about Coach Pryfer, is that he is the only coach with a win for the Browns in the playoffs in the last 30 years. And you're talking about a guy who had to fill in here for Kevin Stefanski when he had COVID back in 2021. They beat the Steelers in a playoff game. So you add a guy in Pryfer with NFL experience. Special teams coaches kind of fly under the radar a lot of times, but a really important part of the staff. And I think with Belichick always being so big on special teams, this was always going to be someone that had a really extensive background at special teams. And then Will Friend's been all over the place in college football and regarded as a really good recruiter and developer.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that that special teams coach job might go to Joe Judge, who you remember from the NFL, worked with Belichick, then head coach for the Giants. That didn't come to pass. And with Friend, it's interesting because he has no prior ties to Belichick, really not a professional guy at all. He is very much SEC lifer. He played at Alabama, been at Georgia as the offensive line coach, Tennessee, Auburn as the offensive line coach, Mississippi State as offensive line coach. Recently was at Western Kentucky as an offensive coordinator. Didn't have the greatest season at Western Kentucky based on what you're used to seeing from there. Traditionally a pretty explosive offense in the G5 level. Hasn't been that good the past couple of years. So that, he's not being hired to be a offensive coordinator at the end of the day. He's there to be an offensive line coach and somebody with significant experience coaching offensive line at the college level, which is different than the pros. You got less time to work with these guys. The schemes can be different, more varied than what you see at the NFL level. So Belichick clearly, he's had two types of hires, right? He's gotten the guys that are NFL oriented, his son, Freddie Kitchens, now here are special teams, but he's also gotten guys, Mike Lombardi is GM, another NFL guy, but he's also gotten guys with significant ties to the college game.
Armon Hawkins the other day brought him over from Washington.
Yep.
And he's regarded as a big time up and coming recruiter and coach, held a lot of recruiting responsibilities at Washington and worked very closely with Steve Belichick in the secondary there. So if he trusts him and wants to bring him over, then you would think that he believes very much so in his coaching abilities.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this offensive line looks. Offensive line, clearly a position of need. You lost a lot. There's been a lot of action in the portal from UNC, whether it's guys from Holy Cross, guys from Alabama, former big recruits. So he's gotten a kind of a mixture of players that are from smaller levels or from bigger levels that maybe didn't play as much as they hoped to. More towards big bodies, I would say, when you look at the offensive line class in total. Just if they've had some guys that are smaller, like the Holy Cross guy, probably going to play center. But in terms of overall, I think this is a big physical offensive line that he's trying to build. You've heard him in comments talking about we are trying to build a big offensive line. Size is an important factor. It's not something you necessarily saw in New England, right? New England's offensive lines weren't particularly big.
Versatile, a lot of versatility across those lines, though.
And very well coached as well. But I find it interesting that once he gets to the college game, the size becomes such a premium for him. So again, just going through some of these names that I mentioned that were coming in. Miles McVay, 340-pounder from Alabama, huge. Chad Lindbergh, former Ohio State signee, ends up going to Rice. Big kid from Texas, formerly highly recruited player, 6'6", 315. And I keep mentioning the Holy Cross guy. He does have a name, Christo Kelly, the 6'4", 305-pound center from.
That was his first. That was his first commit. So we can't forget that name.
Yep. William Boone, who we talked about at length on this show, Prairie View A&M. So a guy from the FCS level, 6'6", 340 pounds. So again, you're seeing a premium on size with the offensive line. Can Will Friend get this big group into a cohesive unit?
Talking about this offensive line, you need that as the foundation. But at the end of the day, you need a quarterback. Still a bit of uncertainty as to who's going to be their starter next year. But it looks like Belichick and Coach Kitchens are kind of locking in on a guy early on here for next recruiting class. And that's Derek Zammit, who was offered last weekend and is now going to be visiting this upcoming weekend here. And this is a guy for the next recruiting class, 4-star recruit out of New Jersey. DePaul Catholic has offers from Mississippi State, Cincinnati, Duke, I'll pull up the huddle here in a minute, was in the All-American game the other day, the Under Armour All-American game, and someone who he still has to fill out a bit, but nice combination of some confidence in the pocket, some mobility, and is not afraid to make throws downfield.
Yeah, this is someone I saw at the Under Armour game playing with the older class. Right now in the Under Armour All-Star game, All-America game, you have underclassmen as well as outgoing seniors. So you saw Zammit in that game. I didn't know anything about any UNC interest at that time, but watching him, just going back through my notes, moxie, good mover, made a lot of plays moving around, including rolling left, which you see all over his highlight reel, which we're going to pull up now.
He has a sick throw early in this tape, moving left.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what you saw in the Under Armour game, right? He's not the biggest guy in the world. You saw that in the game when he's with, All-America type players all over the place. He's not going to stand out physically. His arm is okay as far as strength, but it's not, a rocket at this time. But he's accurate. Again, plays with a lot of confidence, a lot of moxie. He's from the New York City area, so he's not a North Carolina kid. But there you go. See him roll left, throwing right on the money. You saw that exact type of thing in the Under Armour game. But going to the New York City area to get a kid who's ranked in the top 25 of quarterbacks. You signed Baker last year, top 10, depending where you look, quarterback in the country, in a loaded 25 quarterback class. So you have some young talent on hand that you're hoping to develop, but you got to sign a quarterback every year at the college level. And, if this is going to be Bill Belichick's first official quarterback signing, the guy, as far as the guy he identified, recruited, ran through the whole process, you could see, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Bailey Zappi, who Bill Belichick had at New England. Not going to wow you with any physical dimensions, but a guy that can get the job done. A guy who was a pretty good athlete, an accurate thrower, around this size. You could just see this guy being very, very productive in the right offense. Again, look at the athleticism and balance there. He's not a runner, but he moves around. And I think in the modern era of college football, modern era of football in general, you want an athlete. The days of the big pocket guy that Belichick had earlier in his career, I don't see that being a successful formula unless they can also move around. This guy can certainly do that. There's a nice throw, outside the hash marks. I don't think that's his forte right now as far as just sitting there and driving the ball. But as he gets bigger and stronger, you'll see more of that. So,
and pretty on brand for Belichick. This guy's the number 25 rated quarterback in the country for next class. So it's not like he's a top 5, top 10 consensus quarterback at this point.
Yeah, but definitely a power 4 guy, right? So it's not like a 0-star out of nowhere guy. Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby, Boston College, Bill O'Brien, another NFL guy, Syracuse, all the success they had with Kyle McCord. Those are some other schools in the mix, which to me makes sense for this kind of player who is not going to be physically a top 10 quarterback on paper, but you could see him developing. And then you look at the, 3 years down the line, you look at the leaderboard, whether he ends up in the ACC or wherever he ends up, and you say, man, this guy's throwing for 3,000 plus yards and winning ball games. He's that kind of college quarterback, which, by the way, if you're Belichick, this is a sign that you're not just looking for the NFL prototype. You're kind of switching your mindset more to who can win games in college for you. Zammit's that type of player.